So why did we write this book? You all know why we wrote this book, right? We wanted to help any employee bloom where you're planted, no matter what job you're in, no matter what circumstance you're in, how to be able to thrive in your workplace. And one of the second fuse, which I think each fuse is so important, but the second fuse I think is especially important because it's about change. And I think it was Heraclides in 300 BC said the only thing constant is change. And I always think in 300 BC, what was constant? That the goats were going to try to get out. I mean, I just don't know. But anyway, and I do really love this quote by Robert Redford. One of the things that will always be inevitable is change, full of both vague uncertainty and brilliant promise. And, I think sometimes we focus on the uncertainty and not the promise part, but I think they can both be equal. And so there's only two chapters in this section, and they are reacting to change and finding positive ways to deal with change. And this is a quote that I actually got from one of my webinars, and I was going through my webinars the other day trying to figure out which one it was, and I couldn't come up with it. But my friend Janet Dupree from South Africa, who is a consultant, she says, people do not fear change, they fear pain and loss. And I just really thought that that was powerful. If you can eliminate the pain and the loss and the uncertainty, I think you have a leg up in dealing with change. And we have three very small videos today. And I am going to, this one is really short. How many of you are familiar with Simon Sinek? I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan. Hopefully you will be as well after this. It's 4 minutes, so let's take a look at what he has to say.
If I asked you, do you need to change? And you said to me, no, I'd be worried. Like you think you've figured everything out, like emotionally, professionally, all your relationships, everything's golden. Oh, okay, how's that working out for you? I think the answer is always yes, which is to view ourselves or our organizations as works in progress. That is an infinite mindset. Infinite mindset is fundamentally constant improvement. So, there's big change, there's little change, there's tweaks, there's dramatic change. Sometimes it's reacting to changing cultures, changes in culture, politics, technology. Sometimes the change is our own, sometimes we have to react to it. But I think the honest answer is yes, we have to change. There's always opportunity to improve something. So there's this notion in businesses that people fear change, which is just fundamentally not true. People fear sudden change, but incremental change is not threatening. People fear change that threatens them, right? And very often the way we change manage is we do lots of PowerPoint presentations about what's coming and don't worry, and we have all these things, and we treat it very rationally, and what we're ignoring is the emotional response. Now, there are some people who love change. It's an infinite-minded thing to embrace uncertainty, to see opportunity in surprise. For some people, especially people who have gotten good at doing something for 10 years, 20 years, that all of a sudden you say you're going to change it, they fear, again, there's that emotional word, they fear that they won't know how to, or it will set them back. And so no number of rational assurances will help them get over that. At some point, we have to just let them go through the process. The law of diffusion is a theory that was proposed in the 50s or 60s by Emmett Rogers. And basically all populations shift across the standard deviation, the old bell curve. If you have high performers, you have low performers, et cetera, stuff like that. And what the law of diffusion tells us is that the first 2.5% of your population are your innovators. This is your big idea people. Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, right? Then you have 13.5% of your population that are your early adopters. These are the people who are willing to pay a premium, suffer an inconvenience, extend extra energy to be a part of something that reflects their own beliefs, stand in line to see Star Wars a week before it comes out, even though you can just wait 2 or 3 weeks and buy a ticket and go in. For them, it's worth it, right? And then you have your early and late majority, who are more cynical, more practical. What's in it for me? What guarantee am I going to have? What happens if it goes wrong? Will I get my money back? Like that kind of stuff, you know?
You ever seen the YouTube video of the guy dancing
Yeah.
solo, and
Yeah.
then
I love
the
that.
early adopters come, and then next everyone's coming, and that's a
great-
movement, right?
That's a great example of how it works. Now amplify that to an organization. The innovator is the person who came up with the idea, the person who first started dancing. And other people said, you're an idiot, right? But a small group said, I mean, yeah, but it's fun. You know, we'll give it a try. And then before you know it, it's a perfect example of how law of diffusions work and how tipping points work. When we try to affect change inside an organization, we obviously want to affect the bell. We want to affect the majority of the company. But that's not how change happens. Because the majority will not try something until someone has tried it first. They're risk intolerant. And so what you actually want to do is aim for the early adopters. You aim for the people who go, all right, it's not perfect, we'll give it a try. And if you can get about 15 to 18% market penetration, it just tips. Again, because someone else has tried it. It's happened. And so the way you affect change in an organization is not to thrust it upon everybody because you're going to get massive resistance from the majority, but rather identify the pockets of early adopters, individuals and teams that are willing to try this new thing that you want to try, get the kinks out, and then before you know it, what ends up happening is the majority starts getting angry, like, why weren't we given this? Well, that's called demand. We love that. So it's about building demand and creating that tipping point. That's a more effective way to create sticky change.
So I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan. Yeah, he has a million videos on YouTube, but I think that he is just he takes concepts and he makes them just he simplifies them in such an amazing way. I love that what Lindsay says, totally ignoring the emotional response. And that is that's what most managers do, right? I try to teach in my classes how not to have death by PowerPoint, but it there are some people out there that still try to lull people, I will say, with PowerPoint. So um, let's see. Let me go to, and I want to say that when there is change, it's really important to address the fear of change, right? We all have fear. So is there additional work that's going to come along? What if I can't handle it? Is there fear of no perceived benefits, right? How does this change help me in my life or my job at all? The fear of failure. What if I fail? What if things don't work out? Is it possible to fail forward, right? Sometimes we forget about that, right? There is fear of no perceived benefits, right? How does this change help me in my life, my job, or at all? Let's consider confronting your fears. Partner with someone and describe a time when you felt a fear of change was coming. And maybe we don't need to partner with someone, but let's just think about, was there a time when you felt change was coming and you were afraid? I can share certainly during COVID. How many times was I afraid during COVID, right? There were a lot of times when I thought, oh my gosh, how is this thing going to end, right? I mean, it has upended our lives on so many levels. And how about you? Has there been times when you've had a change that you've been particularly fearful of it?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm in the middle of one right now. I've been given the opportunity to propel my business forward, which is usually what you want with your business, you know? And um, I am afraid of the commitment, how much time it's going to take. I'm afraid of the cost because it's very expensive. I'm afraid of failing. Um, but on the flip side, if I look at it, all of those things could be minor in comparison to how it might propel my business forward. And they're using a model that has been proven successful over and over and over again. And so they said to me this week, just this week, why don't you invest in it for 1 month?
Mhm.
Put your big toe in, invest in it, and see what happens. And so I'm like, okay, I can do it for 1 month and see if it has any benefit. But it's scary. It's scary to shell out money when you're just not sure what the outcome's going to be.
And you know, yeah, you can be fearful of success too, right? What if it makes me so busy that I get overwhelmed,
Yeah.
right? And I just want you guys to know, I know that Mary said that we were co-authors, but she's also like my confidant, my therapist, right? My dear friend. So Mary, you should probably start charging me as well.
But that's what friends are for, Kim, is that,
I know.
you're there, especially when you do a project like we did that
Mhm.
took 4 years to get it done. It's like you go through a lot. Life happens. My mother died in the middle of all of this. My mother in law died 7 weeks after my mother. I mean,
Mhm.
a lot of things happen. And so
Yeah.
you take the life journey together, and we were able to exhibit to each other these things that we are passionate about and put in the book. The things of like compassion. I mean, when somebody's going through change, if you don't have compassion, you're never going to have them trust you. You're never going to have them believe in you. If you don't express gratitude, if you don't have forgiveness because somebody came in a bad mood, I mean, all of these things are so important, and they relate to being able to change. Because if you're in an environment where you feel respected, you're more apt to be able to accept change.
And there's the quote by Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm doing this by heart, but it says it's something like faith is taking one step at a time on the staircase, even when you can't see the whole staircase, right?
Mhm.
And I guess, yeah, I think that's in some ways what we're talking about here.
Bob Quinn has a book, Robert Quinn, called "Building the Bridges." Building. Oh golly, it's drawn a blank. Uh,
Oh, building the bridge while you're walking on it.
while you're walking on it, yeah. So
Yeah.
the bridge isn't there. You have to create it as you go along, and so it's understanding that there's work involved, and it's going to be change.
How about it? Do you guys have a story of when you were fearful of change?
I don't have a story, but I do have something to add to the analogy we're just talking
Yes.
about. Um, when I was an undergraduate, somebody said an analogy like that to me, and then they said the words brick by brick, which was helpful to
Brick by
make
brick.
it like you can take your time and
Yeah,
you just do a little bit at a time, and it takes away that overwhelming, or at least reduces it, that feeling.
that
Thank
is
you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
And I think when you do chunk it up and put it in increments, it does make it so much easier, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't eat an elephant in all in one bite.
Mm, that's right. And I think one of the big steps is understanding the why of change, right? And so I'm a big fan, poor Ron, he's heard this several times. I'm a big fan of the 5 whys, right? Maybe even more whys than that, but starting, why? Why is this going on? Why is this change needed? What are some of the symptoms of the problem? And just keep asking why, because I think a lot of times when we're dealing with change, we're dealing with a symptom of a problem. We're not always even dealing with the problem at hand, right? And so asking those questions to get us to what our um, what is the real problem we're facing, I think can really help us in that. And Groucho, he's been trying to get in, so hopefully he can get in now. Other questions and reflections. In going through the change process, the first step a lot of times is denial, right? And Simon Sinek talked about, well, he kind of talked about the opposite of this, of the innovators. But for most people, first of all, it's denial. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening to me. People are stunned, numb. Sometimes they go on with business as usual and try to ignore, right? That the boss just said this, right? Let me just get through the week. It's Thursday. Let me get through Friday. I'll deal with it next week. Sometimes there's resistance, right? This will never work. This is a big mistake. Anger, blaming others. I always really liked it when I was managing a team, and I got this. I got the resistance, the overt resistance. To me, it's scarier when you don't get it because you think, oh no, what are they really thinking, right? Maybe they're thinking, how am I going to sabotage this, right? And then there's the exploration. And so when I get the resistance, the overt resistance, we can work through it together, right? We can look at the whys. We can explore together and understand why this needs to happen, right? And get them to a way like, okay, maybe this can work. And then there's getting them to the commitment or the tipping point where, okay, this makes sense. I didn't think so a while back, but now I believe we can do it. And so that can be a really critical step.
Kim, are you going to read a few stories? And
Yeah,
also,
I have a few stories, and one is uh, I was the holdout on the Apple computer world in my family, and my family always teased me. They were like, everybody loved apples, and I was like, I am Miss Microsoft, right? And I'm never going to change. And I just decided. Well, my family helped me one day. I got a new MacBook Air for work. And I decided, okay, I'm not going to refuse it. I'm going to accept it. And I decided that I would try to, see how I could make this work. And I embraced the change, and it helped me overcome the denial and resistance. And I explored and explored, and of course now I love my MacBook Pro, and I'm one of the biggest advocates in that. Oh, and I do want to say welcome to Groucho, uh, who has just joined us. I thank you for coming, and I'm glad you could join us. Um, again, we talked about when we were working on this book during COVID. First of all, Mary and I had never written a book. So, we had a couple of big mountains, to climb at the time. But we couldn't change, a lot of the things that we were dealing with during the pandemic, the lack of groceries, the lack of toilet paper, right? The lack of stay-at-home orders, the physical distancing orders, when you came too close to somebody in the grocery store and they just screamed at you, right? Without history to lean on, I mean, we just had to try to lean into these changes and not resist them. And um, it made it easier to continue to accept these things. And I talk about in the book when I decided to go back and get my PhD, and the changes that my family went through in that process. Um, we thought we knew what we were getting into, and we did to some extent, but we also did not, and we learned a lot of things along the way. Jeremy says this is so true. Sometimes not getting resistance is tough too. It is, because you wonder what's going on in people's minds, right?
mhm.
And I want to say that as we worked through the changes, I had 2 children along the way who had major medical issues, and it was there were many times I think I could have stopped, and rightfully so. And I just had a family who was very supportive, and my husband said this stuff would be happening otherwise, whether you were in school or not. So let's just keep swimming. I think he wanted me to get the degree. And so, but he was very helpful and very supportive, and that just made it a lot easier. And when I look at the end result of that, I mean, we were pretty close as a family, but we having lived through that experience together, me having 3 teenagers when I was getting my PhD, um, we have an increased respect for one another that we never would have had, had we not gone through that. So I think these experiences can really bring your relationship to a whole new level. Ron says he has a similar story. He was an Android fa- phone user for years and didn't care for iPhones. He was teased. He finally got his first cell phone issued at work, and it was an iPhone. Tell us a little more about it, Ron.
I loved the functionality of Androids back then, and this was probably, 8, 9 years ago. And I finally got my first iPhone, and going through all the windows and the way that it operated versus the Android, it was just so much smoother and functionality for me at work, and I just grew to love it, and and eventually just my personal phone, I switched over to iPhone, and now that's all I carry and have been for years now.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
just I was resistant to the change.
Yeah.
So, Kim, if it's okay, I want to tell another story.
Absolutely.
Um, I was a single parent for 16 years and have 3 children. And I knew working at the university that if I didn't have at least an undergraduate degree, I would never get anywhere. And so I had an associate's, but I didn't have anything beyond that. So I went back to school, and it took me a good 5 6 years, 5 years, I guess, to do it. Um, and I graduated from with my undergraduate the same year as my oldest son graduated from high school. And my main thing when I went through it was I hope, if nothing else, my children learn to get their undergrad while they're young. And by golly, all 3 of them did. And I was so grateful because they saw the struggle I went through with working, taking care of them, and going to school. So that was a huge reward for me to know that after they saw what I had to go through, um, that they saw the benefit of getting their undergrads when they were young. So I'm grateful for that.
Mary, do you want to go to the questions in the book now?
Yeah, and also welcome. Oh no, Jeremy was with us. I'm sorry. Okay,
Groucho.
Groucho came on board. Glad to
Yeah.
have you. All right, so we would like to ask you to think about a time when you negatively experienced change. How did it make you feel?
And these questions are from the workbook that we sent out, and I can send the workbook out again, um, just to make sure that everyone has a copy afterwards. Okay.
Right.
Could you yeah, could you I thought you'd sent that out before and I couldn't
Yeah.
find it.
Yeah. No problem. We'll
Sure.
do that.
Are the questions in the book too?
Yes, yes, the
Oh,
questions
okay.
are in the book. Yes,
Some
we're
of them are. Yes.
yeah, yeah. Well, we kind of adapt as we go along too. Yeah. So it's like we do experience change, and it isn't always positive. Kim, I think a lot of times the managers don't have the skills. They haven't been
Yeah.
taught.
Yeah.
They don't know how to manage.
Yeah.
And this isn't everybody, okay? I mean, I'm not saying that because I've worked with some great managers, but I've also worked with some that weren't so great. And I think, giving them the opportunity to grow and learn and be a better manager would then trickle down to the employees.
My dad used to always talk about the Peter principle, and when I was growing up, and people get promoted beyond their capabilities, right? You know,
Mhm.
they do
Yep.
something really good at their job, and so they keep getting promoted, and maybe they're leading a team, but they don't have the expertise in that.
Yep. Yep. And I've also found with managers, a lot of times they don't know what work. Oh my
I
gosh.
know.
Oh,
I was like,
hello.
"Oh,
Hello.
Like,
Groucho,
you,
I was like, I do not know what that is, and it's making me nervous.
It's a dog licking the camera.
like he's changed.
He's changed. Yes. Groucho has changed.
Oh my goodness. And how are you dealing with that change, Groucho?
That's a total transformation there.
I was going to say, talk about comic relief. You're talking about change and managers and
Oh,
blah,
that's
blah,
so
blah.
funny.
Yeah.
And you
Anyhow,
know, oh, go
go ahead.
ahead, Mary.
Okay. One of the things that I have found throughout the years with management is that a lot of times managers do not know what their staff are doing. They have no idea of the tasks, the processes. They have no idea. And that makes things even more uncomfortable, especially when they're trying to implement change when they don't know how it's going to affect their staff.
And I have students who come to me all the time and they say, my boss doesn't give a rat's, you know what, about what I think. And I say, how do you know that? Well, they exhibit that every day. And I say, well, have you ever tried? Have you ever brought suggestions forth? I mean, leaders need people. It doesn't mean that just because you bring forth a suggestion, it's going to happen, right? But leaders really are looking for people to step forward and have ideas and, you know, have ideas for things that will work better. And because they can't have all the ideas themselves, although sometimes they think they can. But they do, they need that help, right?
Mhm.
And so I've had some bosses who have just been most appreciative when I've said, you know, I have this idea, it might be a little crazy, you know, but then we start like with a brainstorming session, and we can really you know, get somewhere with that. So I want to encourage you, even if your boss doesn't think, or you don't think your boss wants your suggestions, you know, give them a suggestion a time or two. One of my favorite stories is that there was a group of employees that worked at Starbucks, and they had the idea for the Frappuccino, and corporate, you know, they shot it down. I mean, right away. They were like, "Oh yeah, that's not going to happen." And the employees, they just decided, well, we're going to do it in our store then. If corporate doesn't want to take it on, we're going to do the Frappuccino. And it took a while for corporate to come around, and eventually, of course, the Frappuccino, you know, became corporate wide. So just because you get a no initially doesn't mean it's a no forever.
That same group of baristas would bring back the Cool Line refreshers.
That's true. That's true. And I don't know if any of you have heard of Sydney Yoshida's Iceberg of Ignorance. It's one of my favorite things, and it's from the 80s, late 80s. Sydney Yoshida, he conducted a study of mid-sized organizations, and he developed the expression the iceberg of ignorance. It refers to the fact that only 4% of senior leaders know what the problems are in the organization. We'll say the frontline problems. 9% are known by middle managers. 74% of problems are known by supervisors. And guess who knows all of the problems?
Employees.
The frontline employees. And that's why when a change initiative is happening, it's important not to just roll it out and roll it over the employees, but to get their feedback, how can we implement this better? This is what needs to happen. Maybe it's a government requirement, right? Maybe it's a policy that's come down, right? And people don't have a choice. Okay, but you do have a choice in how you can implement it and getting those suggestions. And I have found in my experience that employees just want to be heard, right? They don't need
Mhm.
to know that every one of their ideas is accepted, right? It's senior leadership's job to take these suggestions and figure out which ones are best and which ones they need to adapt. But just the fact that they're being acknowledged, their suggestions are being acknowledged and received, is almost always just all that they're asking for. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
Well, I think unless anybody has any other stories they want to share, I think we should go on to chapter 5 so we can talk about the positive side of change.
Okay. George Bernard Shaw says progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. Here's a quote by Rumi, which is one of my favorite poets in the world. Yesterday, I was so clever, I wanted to change the world. Today, I am wise, and I am changing myself. And I do believe that change starts with one person, right? Um, it starts with the person who wants to institute the change, and that's really important. Here's this is a real short video. Well, it's 3 minutes, but it's really cute. How to survive change at work. Um, can you guys see this?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Phew. So I want to encourage you to get involved with change, right? Even if it's difficult. I'll never forget one day we were all together, my PhD cohort, And one of the guys yells out, and let me tell you, we got to know each other really well. And he goes, "I don't like dealing with change." And somebody looked at him and they said, "You're kind of getting a PhD kind of related to change. Why are you doing this?" And he goes, "Because I'm trying to manage it." I'm trying to be in control of it or something like that. And we all just died laughing, right? And but I do want to encourage you. One of the ways to deal with change when it's coming your way is to get involved, right? Whether you like it or not, or it's easy or not, when you get involved with it, it just makes it a lot easier. And so I want to encourage you. I thought about showing, how many of you have read the book, Who Moved My Cheese?
I think I did a long
Yeah,
time
it's a
ago. Yeah.
great book. It's real short. It's, by Spencer Johnson. There is an excellent video. It's about 18 or 19 minutes. It is on my playlist on YouTube. I think it's an animated, and I think it's called Who Moved My Cheese. And it talks about the mice, him and Haw, and the two people, and how him and Haw kind of reacted quickly to change, and the two people in the movie did not, and the challenges they had by not doing it. So I really want to encourage you. There's also like a 3.5 minute version as well, but I think the 18-minute one is really powerful. And I can't tell you how many times I've shown it to my staff at work, because it's just it really lays out the advantages of going into and dealing with change, and from a positive perspective. And I also want to, um, and this is on page 62 in the book here. It says, how to increase your ability to deal with change. Uh, First, tell your stories, right? I think, when people tell their stories about how maybe it was difficult for them to go through change, it makes it easier for others to think about this. Or even if a boss says, "Hey, this sucks." This sucks to me too, right? But it's something we have to do, right? I think it helps them see their manager as a person too, that they have to work through this as well. Second, create positive and meaningful disruptions. So, how do you have an idea that might help people adapt in a situation? Show them what you're talking about, right? "Oh, I had an idea the other day. How about if we did it this way? Or how if we looked at it from this perspective?" Right? That can really, I can't tell you how many times I've seen light bulbs go off when people just looked at things differently. Um, Third, take care of meaningful and productive relationships. The relationship is the most important thing. So never throw someone under the bus, right? Nurture that relationship and, come along beside them. Fourth, celebrate successes and strengths by sharing them broadly. And I'm a huge fan of parties and celebrations. Anything we can celebrate, I'm all over it. But yeah, even the small wins, right? By celebrating small wins, then you can build on to larger wins. And fifth, create conditions for growth, right? Create policies, practices, programs that help others grow, and not just shrink within themselves. And in this book here, I talk about the movie The Internship with Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson. And I just watched it when I was working on this part of the book, and how, these two older guys come together and they try to get an internship at Google, and it's really kind of a cute movie. But another movie I kind of watched recently was Up in the Air with George Clooney, and that
Mhm.
happened around 2008 when, it was George Clooney's job to go around and pretty much fire people, right? Tell them that they were losing their jobs. And one of the things he kept saying to people over and over again is, "You're going to look back at this, and this is going to be a high point in your life, right? This is the day your life changed for the better." And and when you have these rough situations or these rough changes, to to take the time and really process them, so that you can move it in the right direction, I think is really 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 important. So
Kim Cameron wrote a great book called Making the Impossible Possible.
mm,
And it's a story about a nuclear power plant that needed to be closed down. I think it's outside of Denver, and how they were able to close it down, and all the employees lost their jobs, but they all contributed to closing it down years early and millions of dollars under budget. So you kind of wonder, well, how is this possible? Well, throughout the process, as people were working on this and endeavoring to reach that goal, they found them other jobs. So that when
mm.
they lost that one job, they had other jobs to go to. So they were downsized, whatever, but it was all done in a constructive manner to everyone that was there. It's pretty interesting book.
That's a really amazing story. And there's a lot of research out there about when companies have had to downsize, and if they do it in a humane manner, in a respectful manner, and as transparent as a manner of possible, it reduces a lot of, what do you want to say, bad mojo, bad mojo within the company. And it also reduces PTSD for a lot of employees. When those things happen, it can really have an impact on an employee for a long time to come.
Yep.
Thank you for mentioning that, Mary. So we just want to take a few minutes at the end here, and and I know we've been doing some reflection, but just think about a time when change happened well or change did not happen well. And what were keys? What were keys to those times? And we'd love for somebody to share if there's
I can share.
okay.
Um, so before I joined EMU, I'm a physician assistant. I worked in the emergency department for several years. And early in my career, it was very difficult for the person who was running the department at the time, saying, you need to stop working over here and do job A and go over here and do task B. And part of my role was to be delegated to go do certain procedures. And over time, I think I just learned, like, if I just accept that change is going to be happening on an ongoing basis, because I learned, like, well, this is a normal part of the culture in emergency departments. You're always assessing needs and adapting to those. So when later in my career, I practiced for 10 years. So later it was easier to be like, all right, what are we doing now? Okay.
Right.
Good.
Yeah, because there is no place that change happens more rapidly than in healthcare, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Similar story, as Kimberly knows, my background is firefighting. I'm a retired firefighter, so similar to your story in the emergency room, we were always having to adapt to change and fighting fire. You may be putting out fire that's in front of you, but something comes up behind you, and you have to quickly change and adapt and do things differently to make sure that you're putting out the fire all around you. So uh, another thing personally for me that changed was during the pandemic. I'm I learn better in person in the classroom versus virtually. So this was a huge change for me these last few years. Um, that I had to adapt to and change. It made me have to concentrate more on what I was doing. Had to stay focused on keeping up with my assignments because I was on my own, kind of, as you know. So
Mhm.
that change was huge for me these last couple of years that I had to adapt to, and luckily I have, and I've kept up my good grades and things like that. That was definitely uh, something that I struggled with in the beginning, but and gladly adapted to.
I think Ron is being very modest. He got the management department student of the year last year. So yeah, so
Thank
he's
you.
being very modest about that. But Ron, how do you think how were you able to become successful through that change?
Well, I had to use my calendar more
Mhm.
to make sure I was staying focused on my assignments. I always printed off the syllabus and the schedule, and made sure that I stuck to that, um, and just made sure that I kept myself paced to keep up with the work. Um,
So you
versus
were more proactive, right?
I had to be more proactive.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. And one of my favorite sayings is a steady pace wins the race, right? I mean, we can all move fast when we need to, but planning out our work and then working our plan, I think can really help us be successful.
It ta
Okay.
it takes being proactive, though. I mean, when you're reactive, everything becomes chaotic. And so being proactive and taking that calendar and managing it to provide a path for you to be successful was key. So I applaud you, Ron.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So we wanted to give you two challenges at the end today. We wanted to make you work a little bit, right? Um, so uh so this is our first challenge that we came up with. So you are bringing out this major change, a new relationship management software. How are you going to get your team on board? And we're kind of looking for you to maybe throw out some steps here. What would be helpful?
Kind of
I
doing
think
something similar to this right now in my job. It's
Awesome.
we have work order system in my school district, so that teachers and staff can submit work orders to fix a light fixture or whatever problem it is. And the system that we currently use is not very user friendly,
Mm-hmm.
um, not only to the users but to us on our side to complete the work orders. So I went through and investigated other systems and found a system that I liked. Met with my employees to get their input, show them the benefits of the system, got their input on it before I move forward with changing the system. So it's
Oh, I love that.
And
I
I'm going to type these things in the chat.
okay.
And I think you gave a great point, and that is involve employees in the process as soon as possible.
Because they're the ones using it too.
exactly, but if you think about it, a lot of change happens in the C-suite, and it's the employees that have had no input that have to implement. Okay, so that's my passion, is helping those people that have to implement what someone else has handed down to them. But your approach would be much more successful
Yeah.
if it was done more frequently.
Right. You get more buy-in that way from the employees.
Absolutely, because they're part of the process. You're valuing their opinion, you're valuing them as a person. They're not just a cog in a machine.
Correct.
So I so applaud you and thank you for doing that.
And I used to do it when we would hire new employees too, right? Obviously, I would narrow the field, right, to a few. But then I would bring in the employees for the final interviews. Because you know what? If you had a part in hiring that new employee, are you going to be less likely to complain about them? Right? I mean, you're gonna establish that relationship, right, and help them out in the onboarding process. What's another way you could help in bringing out a new system?
Maybe you could find some people who are more receptive to change, like one or two, and say, "Hey, try this." And then over time, like that, like to be analogous to the dance video that we were showing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The tipping point. You're the first person to dance.
Seek out the early adopters, right?
Yep.
I will say for number 3, communicate, communicate, communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Is there such a thing as over communication? My husband might say yes.
But
Ah,
for employees, there is no such thing as too much communication, because if you
Mhm.
don't communicate, they will derive their own sense of what's happening, whatever they perceive is reality to them. So you need to communicate to them as much as possible and get their buy-in.
and communicate in different ways,
Yes.
right? So, maybe communicate in an email, maybe communicate in a town hall, right? Maybe communicate in signage, right? Maybe in a blog. Um, I know Ron's heard me say this, that someone needs to hear something 9 times
Mhm.
before it truly registers.
And also, like, even if you have to meet on Zoom, meet in small groups
Mm, yep.
Right,
and let people have a voice
right.
in, create. I would honestly say creating a safe space for the employees is critical.
I battled that with when I took over this job. My predecessor was poor communicator, and I tend to over communicate sometimes, and my employees weren't used to that, but they welcomed it. Now they know what's going on. They know what things are coming up. They know, you know, what procedures are going on, rather than just finding out about them as they happen.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep. Yep. Good for you. Good for you. You are a star manager, Ron.
I try to be.
What would be another way to ensure success in this?
Success starts from the top. I mean, you got to being able to show them and demonstrate it and use it yourself too. Not just give it to them to, here, this is what you got to do.
Thank you, Jeremy, for saying that communication is so key. You have to communicate to some people in other ways. I really like that you said that, Ron, lead by example,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to add celebrate wins. And I guess if I could add one more thing, it would be to reduce uncertainty as much as possible. And that's kind of hard to do. But, don't be afraid. If you are starting down a path and it's just not seeming to work, don't be afraid of coming back together and saying, okay, that wasn't great. How can we make it better? Right. And I think that a lot of times, as leaders, we think if I just keep pushing through, right? If I just keep, well, maybe not, right? I mean, maybe, sometimes you just need to tweak something a little bit. And that's all you need to do. Now, I know our time is up. We had one last one, and I just really love this one. So if we could just stay on for 1 second, and let me see where I can get it, if I can pull it up. You are a team leader at a fast food restaurant, and your team is always on their phone, and your boss is very frustrated about this. How can you convince your colleagues to stay off their phones when on the job? I don't know if you have this issue at work, Ron.
I do. And my downside is I carry two phones, and my I'm quite frequently checking emails and stuff. So my employees always see me on my phone, but it's for business.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're, I walked into a school yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I stood in the doorway of a classroom where, with a custodian sitting in a chair on his phone, was oblivious that I was standing there for 5 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, I encounter this quite frequently, and so I try, well, as again, lead by example. I try when I'm around my employees to stay off my phone, and then
Mm.
check my email when I get into my work truck or away from them, to help kind of promote that a little bit. But I did get accused of that several years ago. Oh, you're always on your phone.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
I
Lynn,
love Lindsay's
yes,
suggestion.
I
That's
do too.
perfect. We need the whole team involved to
Yeah.
work on X, and we need your input. What would it take for you to be off your phone for the next 15 minutes so we can discuss this?
Yep.
It's like, okay, otherwise it's going to take an hour and a half and we're not going to get anything accomplished while people are on the phone. I've seen some organizations, they have everybody put their phone in a basket,
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
and
That'd
that
give me the shakes.
Mm.
but if you say to them, look, because we're a team and we need everyone's suggestions on how to succeed at what we've been assigned, and we'll be here less time, or give us specific time. Can we take 30 minutes without being on our phones to try to deal with this or come up with something constructive? Because it's going to happen a lot easier naturally if people are not on the phone. I want to tell a quick story
Yeah.
about change that I think is really, really important. Again, this is from Professor Kim Cameron, the one who wrote Making the Impossible Possible. Um, he said, if you're in a plane and taking off from Detroit and flying around the world, and you're off by 1 degree, so instead of doing 360 degrees around and coming back and landing in Detroit, if you're off by 1 degree, you're going to land around Atlanta or north of Toronto.
Really?
Wow.
A 1 degree change can have a huge impact. It doesn't have to be the whole thing
Mm.
at one time, it's little by little. And that makes change a lot easier.
And that I love that. And I'm a huge fan of Amy Cuddy's TED Talk, how your body language shapes who you are. And one of her key takeaways from that TED Talk is tiny tweaks can create big changes, right?
Hmm. I haven't read it yet, but I listened to someone be interviewed. His name is BJ Fogg, and actually he's in Hawaii. He's a professor in Hawaii, Kim.
Mm.
And his book, I think, is Tiny Habits.
Oh,
Well, he said there's like 300 stories in there of how people have, adapted through tiny habits.
all right, Mary, that's my next book, Tiny Habits. I already got 4 sitting here. What am I going to do?
Mhm.
Hey, Ron, can you show that book? Hold that book up again that you just had our book.
Oh,
Yay!
Self-promotion. Oh, and Lindsay's got hers up there. Yay.
I have
Thank
mine
you.
close by.
Oh my
yes.
goodness!
Oh, thank you.
We need
Thank
all 3 of you to hold them up. Can you do that?
Yes, can all 3 of you so we can get it in the video?
Right.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh,
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Thank you for joining us today. I hope
thank you.
that you got some new pearls of wisdom, and we look forward to next time delving into
Strengths.
strengths and how to play to your strengths.